Got Mike Echols with us today, and I had the opportunity to be a teammate of Mike. He was a year behind me, so a graduate of Ursuline in 1997. I had the opportunity to play with him and Sean Penny, junior high, even Northeast Tar Heels, right?
Mhm.
Those are many, many years ago. And I appreciate the opportunity to kind of catch up with him. And Mike, we've talked on the phone a few times and kind of hashed out a little bit of this conversation and being able to kind of get a little bit more of the background that I already knew. It's even more intriguing in hearing some of the stories you have. So we always just like to start with a little bit of your background, some of your family history, coming up and the path that led to your days at Ursuline and leading into the rest of your life. So appreciate you being on and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, man. I'm glad we was able to finally link up to do this. Um, I am a fan. I got to watch, what you did with Penny, and obviously we got some history. So anytime, somebody from the old neighborhood, the old Ursuline call and ask to sit down and talk about what we all love is football, I'm always game.
Absolutely. And, it was kind of cool being able to see both you and um, Sean have a great year after, I'd graduated. Both you guys had great years that year, your senior year in high school. And then to follow on what you've done at Wisconsin, what I think, and you can probably fill me in on that, even more so the heyday, right? A fantastic run in your years at Wisconsin. So what kind of brought you to, football and growing up on the north side, choosing Ursuline? What was your path to going to the green and gold?
So my older brother Rob, he was playing football at Ursuline, and man, for me to go and watch them play, those Friday nights under the lights, man, I used to just love it. And when I used to go out there, I mean, I was still a kid. I didn't really understand the true dynamics of the game, but I just knew what I liked to see, man. I used to watch these guys go out there and compete. Him, Kevin Ellerby, um, those guys are the ones that I looked up to, man, when I was out there, and I always wanted to, kind of be in their shoes one day. Um, but it didn't always come out that way. When I was younger, man, I was a basketball guy. I just like playing basketball. That's what, my best friend Dave did. And, um, I just wanted to hoop. I thought I was going to be Jordan at one point. Um, but, the father, my pops, man, love him to death, man. He was like, hey, man, you need to, go down there and try to play for the Northside Knights. That's who it was at the time, man. So my first experience was being dragged down there to play, and I actually went down there. I was crying my eyes out. I didn't want to go play any football. I didn't know anything about it really. I just, wanted to continue to play with my friends. But he forced me down there. Uh, Funny part about it, my very first position was defensive end. I mean, I was probably like 90 pounds, soaking wet. But because of my age, I had to play for the 120s. And I had no idea what I was doing. Um, so, that's kind of how I started. We won a couple championships down there with absolutely no help of myself, right? I can't even lie. I hadn't even figured it out yet. Um, I really didn't start truly getting better in the game until like seventh and eighth grade, right? Because that's when I started playing with the Northeast Catholic and playing for Ungaro out there at St. Anthony's. We would go out there and practice. And, myself, I know Penny was there. Obviously, you were out there. And I still was small as I don't know what, but I was one of the better tacklers. So, and I always joke with Ungaro about this all the time, about how he put me at middle linebacker and I couldn't even see over the line. So I just and I had to go up against Penny, who it seems like he was 215 even in grade school, right? And I had to go and tackle him all the time, right? But I love to hit. That was just something I loved to do. But that was I've dreamt of maybe being the DB or something like that. Middle linebacker was just not it. But that's what I did, and that's what I played the entire year.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. One of the things that I always remembered about you, like from, the first thing, not about, as a teenage kid, you did, man, you were a striker, period, end of story. Like I remember your sophomore year, when you kind of stepped in as, I think you were a starter, right? Getting some big hits, and anybody who knew you at that time, it didn't look like you were bringing a lot, but you did.
Hey man, one thing I know is that it hurts less when you're going full speed, right? So I'd rather try to deliver the blow as opposed to taking the blow, and especially at my size, um, I had to put the full force in. So that was, that really carried over and all the way through college. Through the rest of my career, my ability to tackle. I've always been told by my college secondary coach that, I would have been a great safety, but, I made myself a great corner. And that was always the ongoing thing, right? Because of my ability to tackle.
Do you think, I often wonder, like we've talked to a couple guys on here, and one of the things that a lot of them talk about, and a lot of them were skill guys, like receivers, DBs. When they started out, some of them were centers, some of them were tackles, like your case at the end. Do you think that has an impact on maybe the physicality, inside linebacker in middle school? Do you think some of that has an impact on the physicality, your ability to strike? In those positions, you're forced, right? You're forced to be into contact all the time. Do you think starting there and then kind of working your way back is a helpful thing or a hindrance?
You know what? I don't know if it's a help or a hindrance. I just think that it's what you got in yourself, man. It's either you want to get physical or you don't. You can't really force anybody to have that physicality because, there's a lot of people who just don't like contact. And I think regardless if it was playing middle linebacker or DN, you just had to have some sort of dog in you, as they would say, right? You got to want to be physical like that. And I think for me, I just love to tackle, right? That was just something I like to do. So I don't think, regardless of where they would have put me, I think I still would have had that same mentality. And I think that some people are just built with that.
Sure. So, when you enter into Ursuline, what are you kind of thinking in terms of where you fit? You're playing on a freshman team. Not sure what that experience was like. But, matter of fact, we just talked to Felix Cataline last week, who was in the same class with you, right?
Yeah.
What was kind of your experience entering into Ursuline? Knowing that they've had some success, being able to see your brother play, be very successful. Where was your mindset as you enter into high school?
Well, going into high school, man, I just wanted to be able to, be relevant and being able to compete. Our freshman year, Um, you know, we had a really decent team when we were freshmen. Um, and I started to learn how to play corner and play the position. Um, but there was times where, you know, I remember this very, um, we were playing Warren Harding. Um, and, you know, actually the whole year I was having a really good year. But for some reason, that in that particular game, man, I got beat for like 2, 3 touchdowns, man. Like all those hitch and goes. Um, and, you know, I just remember coming back after the game and sitting in the locker room and just crying about it. And it was really mentally hurt about not playing well. And I remember Roland Smith, man, Coach Smith, and he came up to me and he was just like, you know, he was like, you know what, Mike? He was like, the fact that, you know, you are that emotionally invested in what you're doing, you're going to be all right. And he was just like, you know, you just take it as a learning lesson. And he was, I always see he gave you the old speech of, you know, if this is the worst thing that happens to you in your life, then you're going to be just fine, you know. But I, you know, took that and, you know, I really started to work on my game, man. You know, I didn't want that particular uh, incident to happen again where I would cost my team or just not play to the capabilities that I had, right? You know, I was still looking up to guys like Trevor Starger, who was, you know, probably our, you know, best corner at the time, you know, playing varsity and you know, I just really wanted to be good. I just, you know, wanted to be better, lived up to my name. You know, my brothers who've been through there, right? And I just wanted to continue to compete. So I think that particular moment is what um, really drove me to really start working on the craft of being a good football player.
You know, it's interesting that, you know, what, 14, maybe 15-year-old kid as a freshman coming in, that you have that maturity and kind of intelligence in athletics to have that honest conversation with yourself, right? A lot of and I often wonder, you know, what makes an elite athlete an elite athlete. Obviously, it's the physical talent, but then, like, to your point, there's that investment, thinking about your craft, like you said. Um, you know, and that's a great thing to have at such a young age to help you fight for that path that you're looking for.
Yeah,
Um,
I have to agree with you on that. And it was, but I also had some um, good coaches, right? You know, Roland Smith, right? I mean, to have him as a defensive back coach in high school, he was, you know, obviously he had his stint in NFL and Canadian, and he had a lot of success, and he's coached and you know mentored a lot of good players that have came out of Ursuline, man, from running backs to DBs, and uh, to have somebody like that within our program at the time, I think that was invaluable.
yeah, you know what? And you brought him up. I was going to bring him up, but let's talk about that because, you know, my experience with Coach Smith was, um, you know, he wasn't my position guy, right? And every player has that coach that they connect with, and you know, obviously working out with him in the weight room, it's there. But when you got your 5, 6 guys that you're going to practice with every single day and investing in them, um, like for me, it was, I don't know if you remember Coach Vrabel, Walt Vrabel.
Hmm.
Um, you know, he was a guy that, for me, you know, another guy that played in the NFL and has a good coach that has the ability to not just connect with you, but make you a better player. Um, I never got that opportunity with Coach Smith. What was that like, working with him for 3, 4 years, and being a 3-year starter with him? relationship wise and in your development as a football player?
Well, I mean, first of all, it was intense, right? Coach Smith was going to stretch the limits with you to make sure he can get everything out of you, right? I wasn't a big weight room guy in the beginning, right? But Coach Smith had us in there with the windows closed. It had to be as hot and sweaty as possible in there, right? Going through that, and then some of the drills that he would have us doing um, as a DB, man, it gave us uh, a lot more understanding of the game and just what your body was capable of doing. And he continued to stretch us like that. And, um, like I said, it was, he was more than just a coach. He was more like a true mentor and almost as in family because he treated us like that, whether it was, getting us to practice on time or making sure that we ate, making sure that we took care of ourselves. And, you know, and he did that for everybody. And he did that continuously after we left, and so um, it- for me, I happened to been blessed to my path all the way through the NFL have been blessed with some really good coaches. Um, and honestly, I couldn't be um, the athlete, the man that I am today without a lot of these people that were um, introduced into my life for these periods in time.
Yeah, and I think that's and I think we'll talk about it when we talk about your stint in coaching.
Mhm.
I think I think all of us can probably say that you don't nobody's self-made per se, right? It's people that put into your life and the relationships that you make, and we were really fortunate to have good good men around us to um, do those things, and then through coaching, through our experiences, hopefully do the same for others. Um, One thing I did want to touch on, and I realize this, on the state basketball championship, you were a freshman. Were you on that team? Were you playing?
So I was actually on the playoff run team.
Okay.
Coach Cerny actually came and pulled me after the freshman season ended. And so it was more so he wanted us to come and, or at least me to come and be a part of that team, going into the tournament and everything. So, um, that was a great experience, actually. I had wished Coach Cerny had not decided to leave after that year, but, he's definitely seen something in me from freshman uh, basketball that um, he felt like, hey, I would like you to come and practice with us and potentially may be put out there. Um, I didn't play though, so I never got that honor of actually getting out there on the court. But he felt enough to have me with them in case, right? So yeah, it definitely got me a state ring and was a part of that tournament run.
And yeah, that was I think they were kind of like 500 that year, and then they just hit the tournament and just lit it up, and it was an amazing run for sure.
Got you. The funny part about it is, um, after the state was over, one of the first people who reached out to me was Coach Angle. Like, hey, I don't want you to get too excited, about playing basketball. Just make sure you're ready for this football season coming up. We gonna need you out here, right?
Yeah, and you definitely were out there. Talk a little bit about that sophomore year and some of that experience.
So sophomore year, right? We had guys in the secondary like Billy Rose, Double, right? We had, it was still a part of a learning curve for me. I've got some play at receiver more than I did DB. I played a little safety from time to time on that team. But I actually learned a lot from Billy Rose too, man. You know, the one thing about Billy, man, Billy knew how to be dirty without being caught, right? And so, you know, it'll be like, hey, man, the guy catches the ball in front of you, man. Hey, man, make sure you punch him in the back, man. Like punch him right in the kidney, right, while you're coming up to make the tackle. You know, give him a little something extra to make sure we can get the ball out and stuff like that. And those are some things that I took from Billy, man, and I loved it, man. It was a way of being nasty without getting caught doing it, right? We all do some things in the game to take an advantage or to try to get in your opponent's head, and he was good at that, man. So uh, you know, that year was you know, kind of really my true introduction to varsity football and getting going.
Yeah, and then everything kind of kicks off with that what would have been my senior year and your junior year, um, and I vividly remember, and I can't remember if it was your first pick, but I know it was a key pick against Warren Harding, the pick six, right? You know, we were kind of feeling pretty good about ourselves. Harding's always a rival, great athletes, and I remember that was the first score of the game was a pick six, going down our sideline. Um, what's that feel like? In a game of that magnitude, obviously you go on to bigger and better things, but as a high school kid playing at Harding, making that play, that's a pretty big deal.
So to take it all full circle, first of all, you know how they would play the whole war theme
Oh
and the
yeah.
tomahawk all throughout the week of the Harding game, um, and for me, like Harding always hold a special moment, right? Because like we talked about before, when I was a freshman, I gave up those touchdowns
Mm-hmm.
against
Mm-hmm.
Warren Harding, right? And
Yeah.
so for me to come out there and take that pick on, it was Lavelle Richardson as at the receiver. They tried to run the
Yep.
slant. I jumped the slant, took it back for the touchdown, hit him with a couple tomahawk chops on the way into the end zone, man. And it was, it was like a full circle moment for me. Um, that at that moment, I got to the point where I was making plays to help my team win, right? As it coming from when I first got in as a freshman and, you know, sat there and had to be completely upset about, feeling like I cost my team a game because I didn't play to the ability that I could. But for me to come out and I believe it was the first drive of the game actually,
Yeah, it
to
was.
take
It
that
was.
pick and take it back. There's certain moments in your life you'll never forget, and that's one of them. And it just felt great. Anytime a DB get his hands on the ball, man, that's you know that's almost like a touchdown for an offensive guy. However, when I get to score two on top of it, man, it's it's something else. That feeling is amazing for a DB.
Yeah, and that year was a very successful year, in terms of I think I got hurt week 5, um, make the playoffs, played Mooney week 10, make the playoffs week 10, lose that game. Um, that was the muddy game at Fitch, I believe,
Hmm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, the infamous snuck the player on the field, you know, and Butchie boy, I tell you, it
Well,
was
they
always some
they
crafty stuff there. It's illegal
that's
now,
it, man. Yeah, it is. It is. You're
but it
right.
wasn't
Got to huddle
illegal
at the
back
hash.
then. Yeah.
That's why they changed the rule. I tell Vecchio that all the time. Every time I see him, I tell him. He's like, "No, it wasn't planned. I just walked back and gave somebody the towel and just stood on the sideline."
Yeah, they was working on that all week in practice. I promise you that. But because we had to play Mooney back to back weeks,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
the first game, speaking of Vecchio, they threw like a hitch to me, and I rolled my ankle off a tackle by him that first game.
Okay.
And so the muddy game, I was kind of like, it was more of a day to day if I was going to even play.
Really?
Um, yeah, and my ankle was really tore up, but I knuckled it up, but I still wasn't, you know, at 100% in that game. But it was just a sloppy game, and it wasn't really a whole lot of let's try to throw the ball to Mike or them throwing the ball. It was just a pound and grind game. So, I was able to be out there and do what I needed to do. But, it sucked that we lost it though.
Yeah, that was I think the first one they rolled pretty good. I think Reno Ferree had a really good game. And then, the next week tightened it up. But what's going through your head now? You have a good junior year. I'm sure the recruiting process is really kind of starting a little bit, gearing up. Um, you have a successful season. You're going into your senior year. What's taking place in your head and athletically? What are you thinking about?
At that point in time, it was kind of myself, Penny, right? Some of the seniors, Sean Conway, Bernie McGinnis, obviously Felix was there as well. We were just, man, thinking about having a even better season, and we were trying to figure out the things that we can do to just be better. Um, Penny and I were setting goals at the beginning of the year. For some reason, we walked across a record book that was sitting in our office, and um, Penny was like, "Well, I'm gonna break the rushing record this year," and I said, "Well, I'm gonna have over 10 interceptions," and that was the goal, right? Um, and that was kind of everything. Kind of led to that moment going in to our senior year, and then Angle had dropped a ball or a bomb on me, saying that, "Hey, this year we're going to put you at quarterback early," right? And he was just like, I guess in his mind, he felt like, we want our best athlete to have the ball in his hands first, right? At least that's how he preached it to me. We would give it to Jerry Howe. They were kind of thinking of that aspect of it. Um, and so pretty much the whole summer, I was trying to figure out how to throw the ball and play quarterback. That lasted about 3 games. And then they moved me back out to wide out where I can do the things that I need to do.
And was that when? And I might be wrong in this. Was when Poltar came up?
Yep.
Okay, he'd have been a
Yep.
sophomore at the time, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Poltar would have been, yeah, he would have been a sophomore, I believe, at that time. But that's
okay,
when he took over at quarterback.
okay. I mean, when you got you out on the perimeter and you got number 6 in the back to hand it off to, that makes playing quarterback quite a bit easier for a young guy.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
it helps. It
For
helps a
sure.
lot. Let's put it that way, right? Um, and then so obviously your senior year, you end up with 11 picks.
I ended up with 10. I
10.
actually got 10. Yep.
Okay.
I got and back then playoff stats didn't count, right? So it was what you got in the regular season is what it was. So I literally got it uh, in the last game. So I had 9 and got a pick in the last game to get 10. So I reached that goal, and Penny, he had 2,000, right? So he did what he had to do.
So I was thinking about that. At that time, teams weren't throwing it a lot, right? Like the teams weren't throwing it. So like to me, that number for 10 picks in a season at that time is really kind of amazing. And it's I mean, I don't know how they're throwing it to you. How they're throwing it at you. It seems like if they're throwing it at you, it's getting picked. I'm sure you had, some defenses in there too. Like you weren't giving up too many. I mean, that's a lot of picks in the era of football that was being played at that time. Like that's an unbelievable stat.
It really is. And I could sit there and think about some of the ones that I dropped too, right? So I felt like I could have had a lot more. But, to do that, it's not very easy. And you got to have quite a few multiple interception games, um, which I was able to do. And you're right. I just had to, obviously, I had to cover the best guy that every team had, even if it was only one or two, or they only would throw to him so many times. But then there was a lot of other interceptions that I got that were just from film study. So, there were, and I tell people this when we talk about football, and somebody had mentioned this to me, and I've watched somebody say it. They were saying how, at some point the game slows down for you. And I really started to experience that when I was a senior, because it seemed like everything that I've practiced, everything that I was prepared for, it felt like I was moving 100 miles an hour and everything else was slowed down. And so it's almost like I could see it like develop in front of me. And I don't know, it's hard for me to explain to people if they haven't experienced it, because I didn't understand it until I experienced it. And it kind of happened on every level at some point. But, during that time, man, it was just like, man, I could just see the routes coming, and I was able to jump a lot of routes and make a lot of plays. And, there's certain plays that we would practice, and I saw that my other corner made the wrong read, and I just left my man and went and picked it off. Like, there was times that I did stuff like that, and it was just like, man, like, it just, I honestly, I really can't explain that. I know it's got something to do with just the confidence, something to do with the preparation, right? And just understanding the game plan, which allows it to play out in front of you in real time. Like, I could see the little nuances that a DB or a corner would, or I'm sorry, a receiver would do. I could see, okay, so he's lined up, in this formation, and he's like on the bottom of the numbers. Every time he was there, he was running this quick out, right? Like, and it was just like, that's what I'm gonna play for. And it 90% of the time it was always accurate, just by preparation and understanding what was going on. And to be able to do it at that level was the reason why I was able to get 10 interceptions, man. It wasn't just dumb luck. It was, preparing and being in the right place when I was supposed to be in the right place. And I guess that's kind of how my senior year was, man. The game just really slowed down for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty of talent and football IQ coming together, right? And that's where the magic happens from. The confidence that you said you have. I mean, certainly being successful as getting time as a sophomore, being successful as a junior, and then now you've kind of seen, you haven't seen everything, but you feel like you have, right? And then you're watching film, and I mean, that's just a huge compliment to what you did. And like, again, I mean, it was a 3-yard war at that time, especially in Steel Valley, right? So you go on from Ursuline, you're successful, and I know we talked about this a little bit on the phone. How did Wisconsin kind of fit in and into your decision, and how did you make that choice?
So, when I go back and talk about this, man, I wasn't a blue chipper, like nobody really knew much about me coming from Ursuline, who at the time was a smaller school. Most people knew about the big running back that we had that rushed for so many yards. Um, it happened to just be by chance, right? So Jay Hayes, the um, Wisconsin recruiter and defensive line coach up at Wisconsin, he had came by to visit Ursuline because that was uh, part of his recruiting trail, and he was just came in was like, I always come by here, just to kind of see because you guys usually have some talent at Ursuline, and I was able to give them some film to watch, right? And so I always tell kids, even when I coach, man, hey, the eye in the sky don't lie. What you put on tape, man, is what people will see, right? Whether they've ever seen you before. When you put on the tape, whatever you show out there is what's going to be representative of yourself. And so, obviously I put on some of the great ones, right? Games against Boardman where, return kicks and multiple interception games, JFK, 3 interceptions, you know, touchdowns, Warren Harding took another kickback on that. And just basically when he got done watching the tape, man, he was like, every time every game I'm watching, you're either taking the ball away from somebody, you're returning a kick, you're burning somebody deep. He was like, it's just like, you know, you're so involved within the game, on all sorts of aspects. And he was just like, I'm gonna take the tape back to Wisconsin. He was like, but we definitely will be calling you, right? And the funny thing about it is that, years later, after I didn't graduated from Wisconsin and everything, and I was talking to some of the coaches, and there was like a meeting about this. One of the other coaches, which is Henry Mason at the time, he had a guy that he wanted. I was like the last scholarship to Wisconsin, and they were kind of going back and forth over it, and Coach Hayes ended up winning because of just my tape. It was just too powerful for them to kind of pass on that, with the speed and everything that I was able to do. So they ended up sending me or offering me a scholarship. One of the other places that I did go during that trip, I went to Ohio University. I also went out to West Virginia. Um, and then after that, I kind of stopped. I knew where I wanted to be, right? I really liked Ohio University. I'm gonna be honest, like I could have went to the MAC. They offered to let me play both ways, receiver, DB, and
Hmm.
the recruiting aspect of it, man. They treated me, like they truly wanted me, right? And um, I really did like their coaching staff, and I liked the university and all of that. But when I took the trip out to Wisconsin and got to meet Barry Alvarez and got to walk into the secondary room, and they were preparing for the bowl game at the time. They were going to the Copper Bowl to place Utah, and um, I got to like look at the DBs, and I'm like, man, they don't look that big. Like I might have a shot. So, and then obviously as a kid, man, and through high school, man, I've always wanted to play in the Big Ten. I wanted to play in the Rose Bowl. Like that was always a dream of mine, and just going out there watching Desmond Howard play out there, and watching all of the great Rose Bowls, and it's the granddaddy, and hearing Keith Jackson speak, and that's what I wanted to do. Like that was for me the ultimate, dream. And we I almost Penny and I was going to try to go to the same school. We were going to try to go to Ohio State together, as well as we also looked at West Virginia's because we went on these trips together. Ohio State told me I was too small. They said, you're just a little too small to play here with us,
Hmm.
right? And we can get into that later, but I had to make them pay too. But but overall, I ended up you know decided to go with Wisconsin, which I think was probably the best decision I could have made. Um, but like I didn't have a million suitors, you know, at that time. You know, later on, I found out from Coach Angle that, you know, Miami was looking at me, and he just felt like I didn't want to be that far from home. So he just never really mentioned it, which I thought that was kind of odd, but maybe it just worked out for the best, I guess.
The Hurricanes. That would have been in the heyday.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You know, that'd have been that Ed Reed, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
time down there. That
Yeah.
might not have
Yeah.
been a bad little stop off.
Well, it worked out quite well for you. Um, talking about the Rose Bowl, um, talking about playing Ohio State. I think it worked out really well for where you went. You know, and at that time, um, you know, the Big Ten at that time was where it was at, right? I mean, that was the conference at that time to be in. Um, what so you got redshirted your freshman year, right? The first
Mhm.
year, you know, and then so you know what's that redshirt year like for you in terms of kind of settle in, getting ready to go, because then obviously after that you're in the mix.
Yeah, man. So that redshirt freshman year was critical for me. I wasn't ready. When I got out there, as good and as confident as I was in high school in that senior year, you know, the game sped back up, right? Those guys were fast out there, man. I got guys like Tony Simmons, who's an Olympic sprinter. You know, I got, you know, you got Ron Dane out there, uh, you know, big as hell, but fast as shit. Like you just didn't know, like, that a guy that big can move like that, right? And so that whole redshirt freshman year, man, I literally spent my time in the weight room and trying to get better, faster. I already thought I was fast, but you know, I had to put on some weight and get some strength. And I really spent most of my time doing that. You know, the funny part about it is, you know, my original goal for hitting the weights, it wasn't because I wanted to be great at football or just build my body. I was just like, you know what? I'm so frail, man. If I hit the beach, man, I got to make sure people know that like I'm working out or I'm some sort of athlete here. So I literally was literally my motivation when I first started hitting the weights that hard. And I mean, I was PRing so much, right? And the crazy part about it is that because of my workouts and the way that I attack school is what really made the coaches start putting an eye on me, right? When you go out there and then we testing 40s in spring and I'm running a 4.3, like, you know, whether you could play or not, they're going to try to take a look like, oh man, hey, this guy can fly and he's doing all the right things, right? He's working out, he's getting stronger, his vertical is out of the gym. And he's one of the guys that's, you know, getting honor roll and going to all his classes, right? I just really did all the right things, you know, to put myself in position to at least be able to compete that next year.
Yeah, did so that that next year, right, red shirt freshman year, you become a starter, right?
Yeah.
And so what's kind of the landscape or your thoughts? I often wonder this, right? So you know, in high school, you got a Boardman game, you got the Mooney game. You know, we get some good crowds at YSU. Um, what's that transition like coming out in a Big Ten game, in a home game? You know, down at the Horseshoe, your first experience. What's that like?
Man, it is, it's amazing, man. Like to run out of a tunnel, it doesn't matter whether it was a home game, away game, to see the mass of people that are out there screaming and yelling and um, it's a feeling of adrenaline that you I probably only could compare it to, you know, maybe somebody performing in Madison Square Garden as an artist or something to that effect, where you got that kind of crowd just cheering you on, coming out there. At Camp Randall, before they remodeled it, man, we would just go, like, when we had to come out for a game, we had to walk through like the concession stands. So we will walk through there, and there's a line of people, everybody over there, and they just beating you up, smacking you on the helmet, like as you going through, and they just getting you all riled up. Like, that was the thing, man. You walking through the entire concession stands where everybody's buying their food, drinks, whatever it is, and they so rowdy, right, getting ready to go. That's why Camp Randall in Wisconsin is one of the best football atmospheres, and they talk about it all the time because that fan base. Obviously, there's nothing else. It's us and the Packers, right? So it's just like that Wisconsin is like with Wisconsin people and natives, like that's where they're going. And man, it was that shot that you get coming out of that tunnel. Man, was second to none, man. It's amazing. And you talk about the horseshoe with over 100,000 people there, right? And they're not your fans, right? So, you get all the boos and everything else, and it feels like a good movie, right? Gladiator, right? You're going out there to the gladiator pit, man, and there's all these people in the Coliseum, right? Just screaming and yelling and waiting to see a show, man. And it feels like that. And I always feel like football is probably the last gladiator sport there's left because everything else is getting so soft. But that's that feeling, man. It is amazing. And I honestly, the college feeling is even more intense than the NFL feeling when it comes to fan bases and crowds.
Really?
Absolutely.
That's you do see the fandom, right? And it is that's why I wonder, right? And I wonder, that has to be something that young guys have to navigate coming in. The pressure of that, that has to be one aspect that could make or break somebody, especially. And I think the unique thing about playing in secondary, you make a mistake, everybody sees it, and the wrong band's playing. And that is, there has to be certain mentality that you guys have to be able to overcome that. And they say football is a team sport, and it is in certain contexts, but it's 11 one-on-ones, right? And that's a unique thing from the secondary that I think is the mental approach you guys have to take is just really impresses me, especially at that level and magnitude.
Yeah, that's extreme. It's extremely high level, man. You definitely have to be, for one, you got to be able to have amnesia, right? You got to be able to forget giving up a play because, there's going to be times that it happens, right? But then you got to forget about it. You got to think about the next play. And I think that is the most important thing. You can't get down on yourself because there's a lot more ball to be played. There's a lot more stuff going on out there. And obviously, as a DB and a corner, I mean, I believe corner, besides quarterback, is the hardest position to play. I got to go backwards. I got to figure out what the receiver's trying to do to me and be able to come out of my back pedal and attack. As a receiver, they already know exactly where they're going. They know exactly what they need to do. And I'm more in the guessing game. I got to have the film. I got to have the cues on their body language. I have to have all of that while still trying to maintain the back pedal. So that's why, cornerbacks are a premium when it comes to NFL drafts, and why you see so many go off the board and so many, high rounds, because when they find good ones, they're hard to come by. It's a tough position to play. But yeah, you definitely have to have that mentality, that swagger about yourself. You got to come out there with a different mindset than any other position. Because you're right, you are on an island at times, and majority of the times my mistakes are magnified to the world where a D tackle can miss his gap and then the linebacker can cover and make a tackle, or the secondary get tackle. If I make a mistake, you're right, the band is playing, and it ain't my band.
Maybe talk about a little bit of that. I think it was the 98-99 season. Those were the two Rose Bowls.
Mm-hmm.
What's that experience like?
So obviously that was the 98 season was my redshirt freshman year. So,
Yeah.
Coming off of redshirting to competing to actually become a starter. By the way, I had to do that in spring camp with 2 bad hamstrings and had to compete because I wasn't the number one choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I wasn't, but I did enough things in the off season to make them give me a shot, and so I had to go out there and compete with 2 bad hamstrings to even get an interception in the spring game with the bad hamstrings against the number one offense. Then they pulled me and put me back on the number one defensive side. But that year, man, with another redshirt freshman corner within Jamar Fletcher on the other side, man, it was about competition and competing. Neither one of us wanted to be the one that gave it up, but we also competed against each other. And he was having so much success early that it invited me to make sure that I was on point. Because when you got a guy that I think he averaged 7 interceptions his redshirt freshman year and every year, right? So when you got a guy that's picking it off and taking it back to the house, right? As a offensive coordinator, you're going to start thinking, well, maybe we should start trying the other side,
Mm-hmm.
And the beauty part about it is that when they did try the other side, it became a long day for them. So my goal was to make sure that it didn't matter what side they tried, it was going to be trouble. And so I was more so, which goes back to the whole linebacker days. I was considered the boundary corner. So when we weren't in man-to-man situations, I would be on the tight end side, the short side of the field, because they wanted me to fill in the run. And so I had to, take on fullbacks. I had to go up and tackle all types of backs from Anthony Thomas to like Vargas and all of the Ohio State backs. And like but it was something I loved to do. But I also was the corner that they blitzed too. So, I've got moments of coming off the edge, sacking quarterbacks in Michigan and getting, sack fumbles and I think I've caused maybe like 2 or 3 fumbles against Ohio State when I was out there and got Big Ten Player of the Week, and just all a part of that path, right? Our Rose Bowl runs, right? We were just out there just competing, right? During that year, my first interception was at San Diego. That was the first one in college, but we had a tremendous run throughout the Big Ten. We didn't have a conference championship back then, so we ended up only losing to Michigan that year, but we won the tiebreaker between us, Ohio State. I believe Ohio State lost to Michigan State that year, so we ended up making the Rose Bowl. And it was the first time since like 93, 94, right, for Wisconsin to have made it. We actually went out there and played a UCLA team who was a non-called fumble away from going to the national championship. So they lose to Miami on Edgerton James fumble that they ruled it as him being down. And then after that, they ended up having to come to the Rose Bowl and play us. So we had to go up there in their home field, right? UCLA is the Rose Bowl. So that entire time we were there, it was all about them. Um, and we kind of felt a little disrespected. Um, and all they could talk about was their high powered offense and, all these weapons that they got. And, we would go to like team events and outings where we would go to like Lowry Steakhouse or something like that, where we do it with both teams, and we would be there on time and first, and then they would come late. They still served them first before us, and like there was a lot of different things in that Rose Bowl that really pissed us off, man. And I was going to take our offense and Ron Dane, and we had. Uh, we had one of the top scoring defenses uh, in the country that year. And, obviously the rest is history. We went out there and gave it to them, and was able to do that 2 years in a row, which we were the first Big Ten team to win two Rose Bowls back to back in history. Um, and, obviously for me, it was a dream, right? I talked about that when I was in high school and I was trying to pick a school to go to. And I just said how, my dream was to play in the Rose Bowl and to meet Keith Jackson and hear him speak about our game. And I got to do an interview with him, Lynn Swan, and Bob Greasy, right? So, they interviewed myself and Fletcher and talked about, us as DBs and being young and are we prepared to go against these so-called gladiators and these supposed to be the great receivers that UCLA had, and nothing had changed for us, man. We were still on the same mentality, man. Hey, we're ready to ball. You know, we've been doing this all year. It doesn't matter how tall they were. It didn't matter, and none of that mattered to us, man. We were just gonna go out there and compete, and we weren't gonna let each other try to outdo, or one up each other. We were gonna make sure that, you know, my first Rose Bowl and second Rose Bowl experience was gonna be a win. Um, and I think that was the mentality, man. And I was just very fortunate that I was able to do that and able to compete at such a high level.
You mentioned you mentioned Ohio State. What was um, you had you wanted to go there, and you guys got them. And you had a couple some good games against them. What was that? Talking about the disrespect in terms of going out to the Rose Bowl, um, going to Ohio State, telling you're a little too small, not gonna fit for us. Um, what was it like having the opportunity to play there and have a great game and prove them wrong and solidify what you were able to do?
Man, that was it was great actually. Um, to be honest, I think we played Ohio State. I think in the time that I was there, we played them three times, and we were 2-1. We beat them both times we played at Ohio State, and they beat us once at Wisconsin, um, which had probably been my junior year. But man, when I got, obviously, when I'm at Ohio State, man, of course, I got all kind of people coming to the game, and it was, um, kind of like that. It was like that for all the Ohio guys, right? So myself, you had Chris Chambers, you had, some other guys that were from Ohio. So whenever we went back to Ohio to play against the team that, you know, all athletes in Ohio who are supposed to be halfway decent should be playing for Ohio State, right? That's supposed to be the thing, right? Everybody goes to Ohio State. Um, and so going out there, man, it was a chip on my shoulder. That it was huge. I just, you know, I just wanted to go out there and honestly, I got Big Ten Player of the Week that week. Um, and it was an ongoing battle between the Ohio State guys and then the crowd, and to the point where every time I came off the bench, off the field, and walked to the bench, I would wolf to the crowd a little bit, like, y'all could have had me, but now y'all got to deal with me. This is y'all fault, right? To the point by the end of the game, the crowd was like, "You're right. We should have took you." And it was just funny, man, to hear him say that after that game, and it was just, man, it was always, you know, those kind of games that made you compete. I mean, in all honesty, when I first got to Wisconsin, man, it was like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Those were the cream of the crop when it came to the Big Ten. And if you
Right.
wanted to be in the end, you had to beat those schools. And we were very fortunate to beat them. The only one team I hadn't beaten was Michigan. I got to give them to. I mean, I used to talk to K.O. June all the time when we were at the Colts, and he used to rub me the wrong way with it all the time. But we could never beat Michigan, and we were close many occasions, and they always found a way to get us. But as far as the rest of the Big Ten, we definitely got winning records versus them all. And I mean, it's easy to do when you go 10-1, 10-2 multiple years, right? So it was always a battle whenever we had to play any of those teams. Um, but Ohio State was always special for us because of, obviously the homegrown, right? And
Yeah.
everybody in Ohio are Ohio State fans. So, you know, I'm the one guy that's at Wisconsin, like, so it didn't change their love for the game, but I had to make sure that everybody knew that, they lost one.
I think I saw that stat line when you were Big Ten Player of the Week, and it was like 2 sacks, a fumble recovery, a forced fumble. I mean, it was an impressive stat line, and to be the Big Ten Player of the Week, I mean, that's a huge deal. Um, so what a better place to do it than versus them, right?
Absolutely. Loved it.
Yeah, right. The one thing I did want to ask you, because I think you know, Penny goes down to Ohio State. He has his injury, and you guys are so close, kind of going through the process together, planning, maybe not your future together, but have similar goals and that type of thing. Um, how did that affect you in terms of, you know, motivation, um, parallel path? Uh, how did that change your mindset on anything? Did that motivate you a little bit?
Well, hearing when Penny ended up getting his injury, first of all, he and I both, for some odd reason, wore 36. So he ended up having 36, and I ended up wearing 36 in college. But when I found out that he had got hurt to the degree that he did, man, it really hit me close to the heart, man. I really felt for him because if there was anybody that really pushed, you know, and pushed me, it was him, man. I mean, from our high school days and some of the things that we were able to accomplish was because of us holding each other accountable as far as and us pushing each other to the limits, man. And I always wish that we could have found a way to continue our careers together. It just wasn't in the books. But that whole moment, it affected me a lot. And for me, it was more so I'm the one that's still out here, still playing and competing. I got to make sure that I'm representing us both. There are some Rose Bowl pictures floating around from that first year. And I had honored him by putting his name and number on my wrist tape. And then I had a picture that was blown up and I sent it to him, you know, after that with me in a Rose Bowl with his name on my wrist because that's how, uh, close we were. And, like I couldn't find a better way of honoring him than to going out there and playing at the high level that I'm supposed to. It felt like he was right there in my ear saying, "Hey, Mike, I need you to do something." Right. And, that's kind of how I took it and went on and continued to try to compete at the highest level, because I know how much he loved the game. And for him to receive an injury like that, to kind of keep him from being able to lace him up again. And, I just really felt like I had to do it for us both.
Yeah. And I'm not like a fan of. There's a lot of guys you're on a team with, your teammates with, and there's some guys that you connect with and that you follow after because you appreciate them as a person and and I always remember Sean just being that guy. Like I just like he was just a good dude. You know what I mean? And you hope the best for him um when we did this podcast, he's still the same. He's a good guy. You know what I mean? And it's like um but we talked about it on the phone. There's so much. I don't want to say luck, but you got to have the talent. You got to be in the right place. You got to be able to avoid injuries and all these things. I mean, it's such a fragile thing to have this
Mhm.
experience, you know. Um, so you play through your college career, and you told me an interesting story about kind of your lead up into the NFL draft, and you were pretty high stock coming out in terms of expectations and high ranking as a corner coming out. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process and what that transition was like into entering the draft and then being selected?
Yeah, man. So that that process, and I don't care what anybody says, is not a great process, man. The draft, all of that stuff, it's more stress than it is anything. I wouldn't want to have to do it over, right? Because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of work, but then there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of, you know, today I might have been right, but tomorrow maybe somebody else is the better pick or better choice for a team. And unfortunately for me, my first time getting injured was training for the combine. So I'm training for the combine. I'm down in New Orleans, and I'm down there with some old state guys and some other guys. And we're down there training, and um, like I get a stress fracture in my left tibia, and it kind of happened right before combine and pro day, and basically I tried to let it heal, but I end up having to go to combine, and um, I couldn't actually run there, and you got to keep in mind a guy that you know runs a 4.26 and jump 42-inch vertical and all of these things while I'm in college. And I'm expecting to be able to go to the combine and blow everybody away. And now I have this injury and I have to run my 40 and do my vertical with a cracked bone in my leg. So, with that, a 4.2 turns to a 4.4, a 42-inch vertical turns to a 38-inch vertical. I mean, the numbers were still good, but they weren't mind blowing. But
Right,
this is stuff
right.
that I had to do, and and that's just the way sometimes God works, right? And it's just, uh, I was still able to get drafted, right? Fourth round to Tennessee Titans. They took a chance on me. Um, but for me, it's just like, man, I go through my whole career, from high school all the way up, and I get hurt, not in a game, but training for a test, a physical test, right? Um, So that was the most disheartening part about it, right? Because I felt like, you know, before my injury, I was slated to be, late first, second round. I dropped to the fourth. Um, and that first day is just like watching the draft. And, I came home, I was sitting with the family, and you're just sitting there stressing out, you know, kind of wondering what's going to happen. And, I kind of prepared myself to like, hey, let's just make sure we focus on the second day, and because I knew kind of where I was standing with the injury and so forth like that. And, um, the first day we were at the house, second day we got up, we went to church on Sunday. They said, we're going to go to church. I'll keep my phone in case they call. So I didn't even watch the draft the second day. And I got the call while I was at church, right? And it was Jeff Fisher, and he said, "Hey, Mike, uh, you know, he was like, we're going to draft you with the next pick." He said, I've been in your shoes before. I know what it feels like to not go as high as you wanted to go and to kind of fall." And he was just like, "But don't worry about that because, you got a home in Tennessee, right? You got a home with us." And so then they drafted me with that next pick in the fourth round. And I became a Tennessee Titan, which was, you know, amazing, a blessing. It was, no matter how it turned out as a kid, your dream when you play a sport is to make it to the highest level that there is. And for me, I was fortunate to do it. A kid from Youngstown, man, where, you know, they don't expect us to 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 make it out and do a lot of great things. Some of us can't even make it out of high school. Some of us can't even live to see, your 21st birthday. Um, and for me, it just felt like, there are no ceilings. You know, it's only a glass ceiling. I could break through it. And I felt like I was able to do that, man. I was able to 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 break through the stereotype, to break through what, the world felt like a kid from Youngstown should be. And so, although it was a tough road to get there, I would never take any of it back. Um, it was an amazing experience. I was happy that I could represent the city. I was happy I could represent my family. I was happy I could represent my football brother and Penny. Like there was so many people that invested in me um, to try to be the best that I can and gave me all that they had to allow me to be on the platform that I was. And so I'm very thankful and very blessed. And I told you that in the beginning that I had a lot of great coaches, man, and a lot of people that helped mold me into what I am. I had a very supportive family who, you know, they would come see me. It didn't matter where I played. They were very supportive. They'd fly out to Oregon, fly out to Hawaii. They were coming to every NFL game, and they just was very supportive of me, to the point where bills didn't get paid so that they can come and support my career. And, I was very thankful and very fortunate to have a family that was so bought into me and my goals and uh, just giving me that support that I needed, um, to get through any of the tough times that I had. And so being drafted was it was like the ultimate thank you to everybody that had put the time and the effort in to me. And so, you know, that moment is will forever be, a extreme highlight of my life. Besides, my kids, you know, that right there is always going to be up there.
It seems like that's kind of a theme, through this conversation is there's not necessarily an easy path to anything you've accomplished, but you figured out a way to get to where you needed to be, right? Um, and certainly that's a testament to you, and that's a testament to the family that gave you the comfort and the stability to be confident in yourself. Um, and unfortunately, especially with people that we grew up with and things that we've seen, and you venturing into coaching, that's not always the case for everybody. So when you get it, it's that much more appreciated. You know, what just a little bit about your NFL career. Um, what was one of the biggest things that you noticed about college to playing in the league?
Well, the league is, I always say the game gets faster. Well, it's a whole nother level of speed when it gets to the NFL. You got to imagine this, man. Everybody that are on these teams, whether they play or not, these are guys that were all Americans. There's Heisman Trophy winners. There's people that were at the extreme level of college football that are just on this NFL team. The linemen are almost as fast as you are. Like everybody's out there at a high level. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't matter who it is. Like the guy coming off the bench who ain't played in like 3 years is just as capable of beating you as the superstar that's out there. And I just think that the level and the intensity on that level is so high, which is why they consider it as a professional sport, right? That's what your profession is, and that is why it's so hard to get to that level. And the game changes, man. Like, and it's longer too. So the NFL season is so much longer than the college season. By the time you reach the college end of season, you still got, you know, 7 more games left in the NFL. Plus, if you make playoffs, so as a rookie, you hit that wall. It's almost like your body's like, okay, the season should be over, but it's really just beginning. Um, and the speed is different, right? Like I said before, preseason, the speed is it's fast, but when it turns to the regular season, the game got faster, and everybody's kind of in form. And then when it goes to the playoffs, it's even faster, man. Like I can't. And when somebody had mentioned that to me, right? It was Samari Roll, and he was a great corner at Tennessee
Mm-hmm.
at the time,
Yep.
man. And I was really close with him. And they were just trying to walk me through the game, right? And they were just like, man, like the game just gets faster, every aspect of it. And it's like, the regular season's one thing. Then when you get to the playoffs, man, you got the best of all the people in the regular season. Everybody's competing for the Super Bowl. So everybody is playing at a high level, and it's almost like a blur, right? And, you know, eventually you start to adjust to the speed, right? Because like I'll be in practice and, rest in peace to Steve McNair. Um, but, running around covering those receivers and me thinking like, okay, I could kind of bait him into throwing this in here. The problem is there is no bait. He's throwing it in there. And what I mean is going fast. It's like there is no way in hell that he got this ball in here. How did he get that in there? So there's no baiting. There's no like slowing down to make it seem like he's open, because they're so precise in where they put the balls. I already told you that cornerback is the toughest position to play. Well, it's even tougher in the NFL. Like you can literally be in somebody's pocket and they still can throw the ball in there and wouldn't think twice about throwing it. And so you had to be able to think so much faster and move so much faster that, you can actually compete at that level. I mean, you could hear Brett's Favre balls going through the air. They were so freaking fast, dude. Like it almost made a whistle as it went through the air. So um, but I was a journeyman in the league, and obviously I played most of my time with Tennessee, the Titans. We were able to make it to the AFC Championship game, but we made it to the playoffs every year that I was there. Um, Unfortunately, towards the end, we started losing to Tom Brady and the Patriots when they started making their run. And after that, it was kind of like that. And then, I went on to play with the Colts, the Vikings, went to Atlanta for a little bit, and Detroit Lions was my last team. And then even tried out Canada for a little bit. So, I kind of hopped around a little bit in my last few years, and um, the league is more of a "what have you done for me lately" league.
Sure.
So they don't say it's not for long, for a reason, right?
Right.
Um, so you got to just be on a certain mentality and competing at that level. But man, that experience and being on the field with people that I got to idolize, man, like, you know, for me, I get to cover Jerry Rice, right? I'm in the game, Jerry Rice on the other side. This is a guy that I had pictures of him on my wall. I wanted to be Jerry Rice when I felt like I was going to be a receiver,
Hmm.
right? And so for me to actually line up next to him or against him in a game, you know, well, it's like that's just like a dream, man. That I compare that to how Iverson felt playing against Jordan, right? He was just like, that's Mike Jordan, and actually he's covering me, right? And so that's the way I felt about seeing Jerry Rice out there. But keep in mind, Tim Brown was out there as well too. So you talk about two Hall of Famers that I'm going up against in one game, and but for me, Jerry is my idol. He's always going to be my number one receiver. Uh, and I might have got him toward the tail end of his career, but it's the fact that somebody that you idolize is somebody that you actually, when you make your dream, can actually play against them. And if there's
How
anything that I'm gonna take from that's it.
how did that go? How'd you do? How'd you measure up?
Well, so it was going good, and then he caught a back shoulder fade for a touchdown on me and hit his old Spider-Man on me. So, and I was right there. And once again, Rich Gannon threaded it in there, right? But prior to that, it was going great, actually. And honestly, that was my last game, my rookie year, because I ended up re-cracking
Mm,
that same leg out there on that baseball field, because
yeah.
we were out in Oakland and
Yep.
running on that. I re-cracked it, so I had to have season-ending surgery and put a titanium rod in. So that was my very last game as a rookie.
I was looking at the years you played, and I just had one more question about that before we just touch on coaching real quick. Um, there was like that 0405. You moved around quite a bit, and I was wondering just from, I don't know if you were married at that time, but I'm sure some guys in the league are married, and how that affects, uh, you know, marriages or kids, or how do you navigate that? Because, that's got to be really difficult.
It's extremely tough, right? So at the time, we weren't married yet, but it was my wife now. But at the time, we had one daughter, um, and I ended up getting released from Tennessee, and I had to try to figure it out. So obviously, she was still staying in Tennessee in the place there, and honestly, it was tough. It was really tough. So especially early. because we were kind of hopping around. I was kind of hopping around, right? I was with the Colts. I kind of went to the Falcons, back to the Colts, up to Minnesota, and then I settled in Detroit. And through that whole time, it was just more so I would just kind of see them every so often when I got a chance. Um, and it was tough, right? The baby didn't recognize me, right? So she was, it was tough trying to grab her. She always would cry. My oldest daughter, Asia, man. Um, and it's tough to be able to compete and perform uh, when you're worried about your family
Mm-hmm.
as well, right? Um, and I think ultimately, when I decided to just shut it down, it was um, that had a lot to do with it, right? It just felt like, you know, I was out there competing, and one quick story, right? So I was in Detroit, and we were having a meeting, right? And I was out there and competing and like making plays to where they actually were like talking about it, like in the meetings, like Eccles is out here everywhere, man. He's like every ball, he's somewhere there. He's always in the play. He's always whatever. And so in my mind, I was sitting here wondering why, if that's the case, then why am I not moving up on the depth chart? You know, I was wondering why I just couldn't slide out. And we had some good corners there. We had Fernando Brown. We had Trey Bly. We had some good people there, but I wasn't really getting any reps. And I know I was out there competing. And we go into, this was like in camp, and we go into a big old defensive meeting. Dick Geron, he was our D coordinator
Yeah.
at the time. And he walks in the meeting and he seems a little disturbed, right? And he goes, you know, basically, I'm gonna talk to you guys and we're gonna talk about some stuff that I probably shouldn't say. But he's just like this. He's like, some of you guys we're gonna keep, and some of you guys we're gonna have to let go. He was like, and some of the guys that we do keep aren't gonna be better than the guys we let go. He was like, but because of contracts, money, and all these other little things, because of the business part of it, that we're going to lose some good players. And for me, I took that as, well, damn, like if that is the case, then why am I still doing this? When you get to the point where you start losing the love, and there's no point if you continue to play at that point. And I think at that point in my career, it was just kind of like, man, I miss my family. Um, I'm feeling like I'm not getting the right or the fair shake at this point. And then when I hear him say stuff like that, and it's just like, man, a lot of this stuff makes sense. And I'm not saying that he was saying that about me particularly, but it's more of a business at this point, which for me, it was kind of disheartening. Um, Especially when you decide to be away from your family, you decide to keep on trying to compete, you're trying to continue to make a living, and you're trying to, win some ball games, right? So um, after that, that's when my stint with Detroit was over. That's kind of when I just told my agent, like, I'm gonna, sit out for a while. Like I'm not ready to go and see the other teams. Like my heart really wasn't in it at the time. And if you're gonna compete at that level, you have to be in it. There's no other way of doing it, right? And I think that jolted me a bit, when I heard that. And so, that's kind of was, you know, the end of the NFL time for me.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure everybody has a picture in their head of what that's like, but only people who have been in that path can really comprehend that. But it kind of circles back to what we said earlier. It's got to be the right situation, the right time, have a little bit of luck. In your case, the business has got to be right and the contracts. And you talk to a lot of people who have done that, and they really talk about high school and college being a much better experience than the professional experience because of those things. One last thing, talking to you now and talking to you on the phone before, like, the one thing that really stands out is your kind of wisdom in football and being analytical on things. Um, you know, maybe not what got you into coaching, but not every great player is a great coach, right? Not every great player can communicate why they do the things that they do. And an individual of your high caliber being able to communicate that to a high school kid that's just learning how to backpedal, or you teaching them. How was that process for you, and and how were you able to be successful doing that, translating some of those skills to high school kids that come to you with many different talents and fundamental flaws?
So when Coach Angle reached out to me to come and help him coach out at Highland, um, for me, I didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to be able to translate that into coaching. But what I've mentioned this throughout this segment, is that I've had some really good coaches. So I've had a lot of people that I can mimic and think of how they coached me, right? And so, at the end of the day, it's about people and how you relate to them. And everybody's not going to do it the way that you did it, but you have to find a way to show them to be better versions of themselves, right? You're not going to always get somebody that's going to be a blue chipper and it's going to come easy to them, but that's the fundamental of coaching, and I was just thinking about this earlier today. When it really comes to coaching overall, I think that art is being lost a lot. I don't think coaches really coach anymore in a lot of aspects. Um, you really got to, everybody takes something different. You're coaching, you know, however many kids are on the team, and everybody takes something different. Some people need a tough love. Some people um, need somebody that's just going to kind of uh, help them through it. But at the end of the day, if you're fair, you're honest, and you're consistent, right, and they trust you, then they'll almost listen to anything that you say and do it, right or wrong, right? That is the beauty of a good coach. They can actually speak to you to where you can understand and to where you believe in everything that they're saying. And those are how my coaches were. I mean, I would have ran through a wall for any of them, right? Whatever they said, I listened because, you know, I believed in what they were teaching me and what they were telling me. And then I went and applied whatever they taught me. And then the beautiful part about it is when you actually apply something that your coach is showing you and it actually works, then you got them. You got them. If I teach a kid how to, hey, you need to read this 3-step and then you need to attack the high shoulder, and they do it, get an interception or don't get beat on the slant or whatever it is. And it's like, man, coach, I seen it. And then from there, anything else that I tell them, they're going to buy in, right? And for me, I was a big component of technique because That's the way I was coached. Your technique is everything. You know, your proper technique is what's going to get you from A to B. Um, and then you just gotta, for me, it was more so, you know, also being tough on them as well. Like, kid will make an interception, right? Everybody's excited and great. Like, hey, good job, good job. For me, I'm looking at the technique and what happened for him to get the interception. And it's more so, hey, you still were trailing. It was just a bad ball. But if you were playing against this quarterback, you know, who's an all state quarterback, he's not going to throw it there. He's going to throw it where you should have been. And hell of a play, but I want you to think about how you could be better at the play because it changes in the amount of competition that you're up against. And so you need to be preparing yourself to be at a high level all the time. And, you know, I remember in when I was coaching high school and we had just finished off a undefeated season and um, all I could do was talk to the secondary about just basically, you know, we gave up some shots that we shouldn't have. Right? Everybody's excited, everybody's ready for the playoffs. But as a coach, my mentality is I'm getting ready for this first round game. And the way we played, we could be the reason why we don't win. Right? And that team really kind of gravitated towards that. And I talked to them a lot. And still to this day, some of those players, and they said, you know what, coach, like um, the things that you had taught us and the way that, you know, you challenged us helped us later on in life and later on in some of our college careers because they were able to go into college programs and look at film and be able to tell the coach what everybody is doing because that was a big point. You need to know where your help is. You need to know what the guy next to you is doing, the guy on the other side. And this is high school, right? Nobody taught me that in high school. But for me, I felt like it was important. And, you know, those guys, man, some of those guys got scholarships because of stuff like that. And they just remind me, they said, you know what? They would tell me, they would talk to like recruiters and stuff and be like, you know what? My coach always made me understand, you know, what everybody is doing. And which made me a better DB because I knew where I could gamble. I knew where if I got beat somewhere, where it needs to be because I know where everybody else is. And, you know, I just think that, you know, coaching is something I really like to do. And I was very fortunate that I was able to do it. And at the end of the day, man, you just got to care about the people you're coaching um, and giving them the best version of yourself as a mentor, a teacher. And I think that is what makes a good coach. You have to be able to understand people at the end of the day and be able to grasp the best out of that individual. If you can pull the best out of that individual and continue to do that for multiple individuals, now you got a full team of people that you're pulling everything that you got from them and allow them to compete above any level that they thought they could. And you honestly have to believe that as a coach. And I think good coaches really do that and do that at a high level.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think you know, even in leadership, right, in a professional, non-athletic work setting, it's that same mentality, and I think you've certainly contributed to what you talked about in the very beginning about, you know, you had great coaches, and so you know, it sounds like with your approach and the things you've done, you gave back and hopefully um, contributed to the next generation of guys who are going to coach and do that same thing. Um, the last thing I want to ask you, and this is kind of how we wrap up every podcast, is the title of what we do is one more down. And so I want you to think about your time. It could be anywhere, anytime, with anybody. But if you had one more down, where would it be, and who would be with you?
Man, that's a tough one. But I would say if I had one more down, man, I would bring my man Penny out. That would be the guy that I would go one more down with, man, any day. That's not even a question, man. I wish we could go and just get it in one more time. Which is funny, right? You think about it, all the levels of football and all the levels that I've been on, and all the success, but you know, that's the guy that I would definitely would want to get back out there on the field with and compete with.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. So, um, appreciate you taking the time and taking some time away from your family and giving us this chance to sit and kind of hear a little bit of your story. Um, I think it's a great message and great things that you've said just about perseverance in general, approach to things, the toughness that you have, and the things that you've accomplished. So I just wanted to say thanks, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I was happy when you decided to reach out. Um, I know I ain't the easiest guy to find sometimes, but um, like I said, I enjoy doing this. It's just like talking in your living room, man. So anytime you guys need anything, man, never hesitate to ask, man. I'm all for it. But yeah, I appreciate this one. It was a good time.